I want to share something. This happened to me a while ago, but it still haunts me. Growing up in a small town in the southwest, tales of supernatural were as common as the desert sun. Stories of skinwalkers, witches who could transform into animals, were whispered among friends and shared around the campfires. I always took these stories with a grain of salt, attributing them to overactive imagination fueled by fear and folklore. But everything changed one summer night during a camp trip in the woods. It was just few of us, me and my best friend Aaron and two others, Lisa and Mike. We decided to head to an area known as Red Rock Canyon, a place popular for its scenic trails and solitude. We packed our gear, excited for a weekend of hiking, stargazing, and telling ghost stories around the campfire. As we drew deeper into the woods, the landscape shifted from scrubby desert to dense pines. The air became cooler, the sound of the city fading behind us. We set up camp in a clearing, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. The atmosphere was serene, and as evening approached, we lit a small campfire and settled around it. That night, after dinner and a few rounds of s'mores, the conversation turned to local legends. Mike, ever the skeptic, laughed off the idea of skinwalkers. It's just a myth, he said, tossing a twig into the fire. People love to scare each other with ghost stories and things like that. Aaron chimed in, but what if they're real? My uncle swore he saw one. He leaned close to the fire, his voice dropping to a whisper. He said it looked like a coyote, but it walked on its two legs. The mood shifted, tension creeping in as we began to share our own stories. Lisa recounted her grandma's tales, warning about staying away from the woods at night. I found myself growing uneasy, glancing into the trees surrounding us for a quick peek. That first night, I slept fitfully, the sounds of the forest amplified in the stillness. The crackling of the fire was soon replaced by the rustling of leaves and distant animal calls. At one point, I woke to the sound of something heavy moving around the underbrush. But when I glanced outside my tent, there was nothing there to be found. The following morning, I brushed off my unease. We hiked during the day, exploring trails and laughing and sharing good memories. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like the woods were watching us. As the night fell again, the forest transformed, shadows stretching unnaturally, and the wind flew like whispers. That evening, we gathered around the fire once more, our laughter mingling with the crackling flames. But the stories had shifted. They felt more urgent and more real. Aaron mentioned something that sent a chill through me. What if it can smell fear? He joked and laughed. But there was a nervous edge in his voice. What if it was real? Just then, a sudden rustle broke through the night. We all froze, eyes widened, scanning the dark and the tree line. Probably just a deer, Mike said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his tone. The second night was everything changed. After another day of hiking, we returned to our camp, tired and ready for a fire and dinner. As the sun dipped below the horizon, an eerie silence enveloped us. Even the crickets seemed to have stopped chirping. As we sat around the fire, the air grew thick with tension. I suggested We tell light stories, but Mike insisted on pushing the boundaries. Let's hear more about skinwalkers, he said with a smirk on his face. That's when Aaron spoke up. You know, the legends say they can take on the form of any animal. They can mimic voices, even the voices of people you know. His eyes darted to the shadows. If you hear someone calling your name in the woods, please don't try to answer. A cold wind swept through the clearing, making the flame flicker wildly. We all glanced around nervously, laughter fading into an uncomfortable silence. Then, without warning, we heard it, a distant howl, deep and resonant, echoing through the tree lines. What was that? Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Probably just a coyote, I said, though I didn't believe it quite. That night, sleep eluded me once again. I lay in my tent, listening to the sound of the forest, my heart racing every time a twig snapped outside. Around midnight, I heard it again, a low, mournful howl that seemed too close for comfort. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a loud crash, followed by a series of quick and heavy footsteps outside our camp. I sat up, my heart pounding, and I unzipped the tent cautiously. What I saw made my blood run cold. A large figure was moving through the trees, but it wasn't like any animal I had ever seen. It was crouched, low, but it stood on its two behind legs, its eyes reflecting the light from the fire. The creature paused, and for a moment I thought it was staring right at me. I quickly zipped the tent and went back inside, my hand shaking. Guys, wake up, I whispered urgently. There's something outside there. The others wake up, groggy and confused. Aaron was the first to respond. What do you mean, something? I saw it. Something standing in the woods, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. It's probably just a beer or something, dude. Go back to sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling. It was something else entirely. The air felt charged, electric with fear. The next day, we decided to cut our trip short. I was shaken, unable to forget the figure I had seen. We packed our camp quickly, Aaron staying close to me as we walked to the car. I don't want to go back to those woods, I admitted, looking over my shoulder. The trees loomed like sentinels, dark and foreboding. Let's just get out there, he replied, his voice tense. As we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but it was short lived. That night, as I lay in my own bed, I heard a sound outside, my name being called, softly, eerily. It sounded just like my mother's voice, but deep down, I knew it was not my mother. It was something else. It was a skinwalker. Hey everyone, my name is Jacob. I am not usually one to believe in creepy stuff, but something happened to me recently that I cannot explain. It's changed my beliefs. Let me tell you about it. I am an accountant, so my days are usually spent crunching numbers in an office corner. Last weekend, I decided I need a break from the city grind. I packed up my tent and some food and headed out to a remote forest for a solo camping few miles from my home. The woods were dense and quiet, with only the rustling of leaves beneath my foot, and the occasional bird songs that breaking the silence in the forest. The day one was pretty good. I hiked for a few miles and came back to my camp, prepared some food over the campfire, I said. The first day passed very quietly and peacefully. But on the second night of my trip, things took a dark turn. I had just finished dinner and was sitting by the fire, enjoying the crackling warmth, when I heard a strange noise. It was like a mixture between growl and a whisper, coming from somewhere deeper into the woods. At first, I brushed it off. I thought maybe some animals searching for food or something like that. And I was deeper in the woods, so the occasional sounds are quite natural. But then I heard it again, closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight from my backpack and cautiously walked towards where I thought the sound was coming before. The tree seemed to close in around me, casting an eerie shadow in the moonlight. That's when I saw it. A figure, tall and immaculate, standing among the trees. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, reflecting the light from the flashlight. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing before me, what was standing there, and what I was witnessing. I froze, unsure of what to do. The figure didn't move, just stared at me with those glowing eyes. Suddenly, it let out a bone chilling scream that echoed through the entire forest. It sounded inhuman, like a mixture of agony and rage. I stumbled backwards, tripping over a tree root and falling to the ground, face first. As I scrambled to get back on my feet, I heard the figure crashing through the underbrush towards me. Panic set in as I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping against my face and thorns tearing at my clothes. I could hear it behind me, its heavy footsteps getting closer with each passing second. It's gaining on me. I ran. I ran like I did never before in my life. I didn't know how long I ran, but eventually I burst into a small clearing and collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. The forest was silent again, and the only sound was my ragged breathing. I waited, terrified that the figure would find me again, but the minutes passed with no sign of it. I looked around the forest, fear gripping over my heart. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to slowly make my way back to my campsite. I packed up my things as quickly as I could when I reached there and practically sprinted back to my car. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing what I had seen. Since that day, I haven't been able to shake the feeling that something supernatural happened out there in the woods. I have read about legends of Wendigo, creature from a folklore, said to be cursed humans driven mad by greed or hunger. I never believed in such things before, but now I'm not so sure. I don't know what I encountered that night, and I am not sure I ever will. All I know is that I have become a believer in the unknown, and I will never forget the terror I felt in those woods. So, guys, if you ever going for a camping or hiking, whether you are a believer or not, be careful out there. You will never know what lurking in those dark shadows. Hey folks, John here. I have a wild experience that happened to me to share here. It was few years back. I love to go camping and solo hiking. I used to go whenever I get free time, and this happened on such a camping few years ago. I have always been a skeptic when it comes to creepy ghost stories and other folklores. But after what happened that night, I can't deny the existence of things beyond our understanding. Let me share my experience. As a painter, I often find inspiration in the nature. So I decided to go camping and hiking often. I decided to take a painting trip to a secluded forest. The air was crisp, the trees towering overhead, and I felt a sense of peace as I set up my easel and started to work. It was on the third night of my stay that things got strange. I had just finished a painting of a serene lake when I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It was a low, menacing growl, unlike any animal sound I ever heard before. I peered into the darkness, trying to make sense of it, but the forest remained completely still. Shrugging it off as my imagination, I packed up my gear and started to head back to my campsite. That's when I heard it again, closer this time. It sent shivers down my spine, and I instinctively reached for my flashlight clipped on my belt. As I scanned the trees, I got a glimpse of movement along the trees. A tall, gowned figure standing among the shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and I felt a chill through my bones. And I realized it was staring at me. Fear gripped me as I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure let out a haunting wail that seemed to echo all around and filling me with dread. Without thinking, I turned and ran as fast as I can. As I sprinted through the underbrush, I could hear the figure crashing through the trees behind me, its footsteps gaining on me with each second. Panic set in as I pushed myself harder and harder, desperate to escape whatever horror was pursuing me. Finally, minutes, maybe half an hour of running, I bursted into a small patched area and lay down on the ground, breathing heavily. The forest fell silent again around me, and I strained to listen for any signs of the creature, but there was nothing, just me and the silent forest. Slowly and casually, I gathered my courage and made my way back. When I reached the campsite, it was all wreck. Something has gone through the campsite, destroying my stuffs. Without wasting any time, I packed up my belongings in a frenzy, not daring to look back into the darkness. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs made me jump along the way, convinced that the creature was still out there, watching and waiting for me. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions. What had I seen in those woods? Could it be in a Wendigo, as some of the locals whispered about? I had always dismissed such stories as a folklore, but now I couldn't deny the possibility. Since that night, I haven't been able to shake the feeling that something supernatural crossed my path. I have been reading about Wendigos, cursed beings lurking in the wilderness. I never believed in such tales, but now I can help but wonder. Whatever it was that I encountered in those woods, it has changed me. I am no longer the skeptic once was. I now know that there are things in the woods that defy explanation, and I will never forget the terror I felt that night in the forest. Growing up in a small town, Halloween was always the most anticipated night of the year. My friends and I would plan our costume weeks ahead, but there was one house that we all avoided on the night of the Halloween, the old Johnson's place. It had been abandoned for years, and the stories surrounding it were chilling and terrifying. One Halloween night, my friends dared me to go trick or treat there. I hesitated at first, but couldn't back down. We gathered at the edge of the property, our costumes shimmering in the moonlight. The house loomed before us, its broken windows resembling empty ices staring back at us. With a deep breath, I approached the door. My heart raced as I knocked on the door. To my surprise, the door cracked open on its own. The interior was dark, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling like ghostly curtains. The air was thick with dust, and I called out, "Trick or treat!" My voice echoed, swallowed by the silence in the house. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper, almost like someone was behind me. I spun around quickly, but no one was there. Panic surged through me. I turned back to leave, but the door slammed shut. I was trapped inside the house. I could hear faint giggles echoing in the shadows, and a chill ran down my spine. Just then, I noticed a flickering light in another room. Gathering my courage, I moved towards it. As I entered, I found a group of kids dressed in costumes, sitting in a circle. They looked just as surprised as I was. "We thought we were only ones here," one of them said. It turned out they had dared each other to enter the house as well. We huddled together, comforted by the company. Suddenly, the whispers returned, more insistent this time. Feeling bold, I said loudly, "Who's there? Show yourself." To our astonishment, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman in a vintage dress, her face pale, and she said, "This was my home long time ago." She said softly, "I am lost and I need your help." The kids and I felt an overwhelming urge to assist her. We asked what she needed, and she pointed to the dusty old trunk in the corner. And we go there, and together we opened it to find an old photographs and letters. They told the story of her life and how she had been forgotten. We realized she needed someone to remember her. After sharing her story, she smiled and said, "Thank you. Now I can finally rest." With that, the room filled with light, and she vanished in the thin air. The door swung open, and we rushed outside, hearts racing but filled with a sense of peace. From the night on, we never feared the Johnson's house. It became a place of memory rather than any terror or any creepy stories. And we always honor the spirit who has shown us that sometimes it's the forgotten who need our kindness at the most. It was a Halloween night, and my friends and I were buzzing with excitement. We decided to host a costume party at my house, each of us bringing something special to the table. I chose to dress as a witch, complete with a long black dress and a pointed hat. But there was one catch. I had recently inherited an old, ornate cauldron from my grandmother, and I thought it would be the perfect centerpiece for my spooky gathering. As the night progressed, the laughter filled the air, and we told each other ghost stories while enjoying the candy and punch. I decided to use the cauldron to brew a special punch. As I added the ingredients, fruit juice, soda, and a dash of my grandmother's old spice mix, I noticed an unusual shimmer in the liquid. I ignored it. I served the punch to my friends, but after a few sips, my friends began acting strangely. One of my friends, we can call him Jay, claimed he could see spirits hovering around the house, while another, Sarah, insists the wall was whispering secret to her, but only she can hear it. I laughed it off, thinking they were just trying to get into the Halloween spirit. But as the night wore on, I noticed something unsettling. The lights, they began to flicker, and the shadows danced in the corner of the room. Suddenly, the cauldron began to bubble violently, and the room grew cold. My heart raced as I realized this wasn't just a party anymore. I quickly gathered my friends and suggested we go outside. As we stepped into my yard, we saw a figure standing in the moonlight. It was an old woman. Her face, gown, and eyes were dark. And she said, "You have disturbed something that shouldn't have remained hidden." She said, her voice echoing like distant wind. Terrified, we backed away, but she raised her hand, and the ground beneath us trembled. "To lift the curse, you must confront your fears," she warned, before vanishing into the night. We huddled together, hearts pounding. "What does she mean?" Sarah asked, trembling. We realized that each of us had something we feared deeply, so we decided to share our fears, confronting them together. Jake spoke of his fear of failure. Sarah revealed her fear of rejection, and I admitted of my fear being alone. As we shared, the atmosphere lightened and the cauldron began to settle. The shadows receded and the warmth returned to the air. Once we had faced our fears, a bright light enveloped us. The woman reappeared, smiling, and said, "You have shown courage and understanding. The curse is lifted." With that, she vanished into the thin air again, leaving behind a calm night. From then on, Halloween became a night of empowerment for us, reminding that facing our fears could bring us together even closer. The cauldron, once a source of dread, became a symbol of strength, and our friendship deepened as we vowed to support each other through any challenges. Hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to this channel. Enable the bell icon so you don't miss new uploads. And also, Check out other videos in this channel too. Like them and share them. And if you have any suggestions or any improvements I need to make in this channel, please post them in the comment section. Till next time, this is Malayali Wendigo. Bye.